Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Successful Marketing Summit, where we have gathered some of the best and brightest minds today when it comes to marketing. My name is Mats David Awesome Goldberg, and I'm delighted now to be speaking with Ryan Helms. Hi, Ryan.
What's up, Matt? How are you?
Just fine, thank you. Just to give you all a bit of background to who this Ryan guy is. Ryan, you started this podcast, the Side Hustle podcast, and been going on for, is it two and a half years almost?
Actually, no, it's only been like a year, but I've put out a bunch of, I think this past week we hit 120 episodes, and it's been, April was 1 year. So it's May, I think, right now. I don't know when people listen to this, but it's been just about a year.
I've crammed most of those episodes, and I love them because it's such immense amount of golden nuggets in there. Whether you're into podcasting or just side hustling at any type, I'll add a link below as well. But you're actually still in the corporate world, and you're running this new podcasting agency, the Legacy Podcasting, as a side hustle as well. But the income from this side hustle still surpassed your monthly income. Is that correct?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. This, so it's been a little over 4 months now since we just started. So my partner Daxie and I, we met actually on an interview like we're doing right now. And we just realized we had some synergies, and then we realized that I take it back. We realized we had some synergies, but we didn't realize we had alignment in what we wanted to do until I went to a mastermind here in Atlanta, Georgia, where I live at. And it was a lot of agency owners at this mastermind, probably 90% of them. And most of them were in the paid traffic side of things. They were lead gen agencies and things like that. And he saw a Instagram story or something that I put up, and he was like, "Hey man, are you at that event with this person, this person, this person?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm there." He's like, "Oh, you're starting an agency." I was like, "I'm thinking about it. Yes, that's why I'm here. I'm trying to get a feel for it. Is this the business model I want to pursue?" Because I'd been doing the podcast, been doing the blog, but I realized that I was getting caught up in a lot of vanity metrics. So I was doing things that felt cool, but weren't really moving the needle as far as revenue is concerned. So I realized I needed to step back and focus on more revenue generating things. And I realized that I needed to find the business model that I really wanted to pursue. So I went there to discover if that's what I wanted to do. And I still wasn't sold on it when I left. And then Daxie messaged me, and he was like, "Hey man, do you want to, I'm thinking about starting a podcast agency." I was like, "Me too." And from there, long story short, we decided to team up. And probably in December, we started talking to our first, who became our first client. His name is Josh 40.
And I know Josh.
Yeah. So Josh was our first client. So we launched with Josh. His podcast went live in beginning of February. We worked with him all through January to kind of get everything ready. And then nothing much happened in February. We really didn't make any money in February. So it was we had this one client, everything was going good. He was really helping us as far as promoting us and things like that. And then end of February came, and both of us went to Funnel Hacking Live in Nashville, Tennessee, which, if you're not familiar, ClickFunnels, the software company, puts on. And it's just full of our ideal clients there. So we were just networking like crazy. And the week after Funnel Hacking Live, I think we probably made $25,000 in 3 days, the 3 days after Funnel Hacking Live, just onboarding new customers and things like that. And since then, we've had some clients that had some really good experiences with us, and it's kind of all been organic at this point. We've got I haven't looked exactly because things have been kind of crazy, but we're somewhere between 10 and 13 clients now. So from beginning of March, we basically had one client. And now we've got, it's, beginning of May, and we've got somewhere between 10 and 13 clients. So it has all been like organic referral and things like that. No paid traffic, nothing really at all. People coming to us just based off like personal branding and stuff.
Yeah, but like from what I understood, like you both started with your own podcasts and just grew into this. What was it that you like saw? We should actually start an agency around podcasting. What made that happen?
So what worked out good in one of the, like, I don't know if this is the right analogy, but like the yin and yang thing that made us like fit together well is like he came from the agency side. Like he worked in another podcast agency for like 4 years. He's got a long story. He got into like e-commerce, moved to Thailand, lived there for like 2 years doing like e-commerce stuff. And then he came back when he was like, I'm done with that. It's not really like floating my boat anymore. And he just kind of worked in this agency for a while, really enjoying the content platform. And then I came at it from like the actual creator side, where I grew my podcast organically as a way just to, like, for me, and we can get into this, like I had launched like a Kickstarter and realized I needed to like meet more people because I really didn't have an audience or anybody in this entrepreneurial space because I didn't grow up around it. And so I'm coming at it from like the creator side, and he's coming at it from like the back end, like agency side. So we kind of put those two things together. Like I had all the insight from an actual creator and the challenges and desires of a creator. And then he had the agency side, like how do you structure it? What's the packages look like? What's the revenue model look like? And things like that. So we kind of put those together.
That's awesome.
Yep.
So now that you started this, do you see something that when you were on your own that you could have done differently? That with this, with the information that you have now, running an agency, helping others, what are the hurdles that they don't have to go through that you had to go through when you started like the side hustle podcast?
Yeah. So as far as like how we help them as the agency, from there, it's really just, we try to make it as hands off as we can for them. So it's kind of interesting. So when, like, even when we got a couple different packages, you got like the monthly services, and then with a lot of big clients, we do what we call like launch packages. So it's like a 4 to 6 week process where we kind of try to create the brand, take them all the way through the process, and launch their podcast to raving fans. And even with that, which you would really consider like a done for you service, there's still a ton of like done with you. So because it's you talking on, like, we can't go to somebody and really like craft their story and have them speak it and it sound like authentic. We could craft it, but when they speak it, it's not going to be coming from them, and the message isn't going to come out the same. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on the client side as far as like the actual content creation. We really help them script that out and outline it and things like that, but the final touches, speaking it, is on them. And then once they do that, they go into our portal, upload all the content, give us the necessary information that we need. And then from there, it's hands off from them. Depending on the client, they either get an email from us with some assets like graphics and things like that we create so they can promote it, or they never hear from us again about that episode, and it just goes out there and then they move on to the next one. So we really try to keep it just hands off. And that's really different, because when I started, I was doing everything myself. I was like sourcing the guest, writing the content, writing the questions, recording it, editing it, doing the graphics, doing the distribution, doing the promotion. So obviously that's a big pain point. It's like blatantly obvious when you step back and look at it, right? If you want to solve a problem, this is a big problem that people have, is creating content. But there's also a price tag that comes with that. And podcasting inherently isn't unless you have a business on the back end to support it, it's not really a revenue generating content medium, right? It's just not really built for that unless you have like a real audience to support it and offers on the back end.
That's really interesting, because I mean that is, I see so many Swedish podcasts right
Mm-hmm.
now. Yeah, they bring value. They bring value. Some of them, not all, as in all of the podcasting world, but many of them try to deliver value, but then they don't know how to convert that into revenue at a later stage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But also, I'd like to like go back. You talking about like the people. If you've never done a podcast or any kind of speaking at all, this thing about like finding your voice, as all content creators talk about, if you're a blogger, if you're a YouTuber, or if you're a podcaster. I mean, now, sure, this could be turned into a podcast, but when you have just the audio with the video, with the written word, how do
Mm-hmm.
you find your voice? What do you have any like suggestions for people to, how do they find that voice, and how do you really dare to actually open up and say something? I mean, most people have something valuable to say, but they don't know how to do it, and it feels like, oh my god, it's a camera in there, and I
Yeah.
don't want to say anything. What are your suggestions to finding that voice and feeling
So
comfortable with it?
yeah, so two things. First thing, realize that your first 10 to 20 episodes are gonna suck.
Yeah,
Just like get it out of the way, accept the facts. Your first 10 to 20 episodes are going to suck. You're going to look back on them. You're going to kind of cringe, but don't delete them, because people love to see the journey. I actually saw a post yesterday in a one of these various podcast Facebook groups, and this person was like, I'm on episode 200 now, and I just went back and listened to the first 5 episodes, and they're so bad. Like, I want to delete them. Should I delete them or redo them or da da da?
yeah,
And I was like, don't delete them. People love to like see the journey that you've gone on. Like, oh, look how polished I am at episode 200. Look how I was learning and where I've came from at episodes 1 through 10,
yeah.
So that's the first thing, is like, just realize that you're not going to be great in the beginning. Like, you're not going to come out like a superstar. So
Mm-hmm.
come to terms with that. And then when it comes to like finding content that matches you and matches your voice and your message and things like that, one of the things that we do with clients is really dive into what are, like, let's think about your audience and what are like some of the attributes of that audience, meaning like what are their pain points, what are their desires, what are the obstacles they're facing, what's the old way that they're doing things, what's your new opportunity, the new way, like all of these types of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you just make a big long list, like we literally have an Excel template that we give clients,
Yeah,
and one of the columns, you're literally just listing off all of these things. What are their desires? What are their pain points? Blah, 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 blah. Going down, going down, going down. And then each of those rows is potentially an episode. So then we take it from there. So you list out all of these things, and you got all these little kind of topics almost that you could hit on. And then from there, you're creating a hook around that. So the next column over is like, how do you create a hook to that kind of entices people to come in and listen about whatever this,
yeah.
thing that you wrote in the previous column. And then we kind of expand upon that as we kind of go down the rows. And we find that when you address things in that type of order, really thinking about it from the listener's perspective and your audience, it's going to be a lot more easy to find your voice, like you were saying, because you, I hope, are the expert in this topic since you're speaking on it, right? And if you think about it and create the content with them in mind and trying to solve their problems, it's going to come off a lot more authentic, and you're going to find that voice a lot quicker because you're not making anything up necessarily. You're the expert on the topic. Here's all their problems. You're addressing them through the spoken word, through the podcast. And it's going to align a lot better than trying to come off and I don't know, like it's tough to find your voice when you do interviews, right? So when I'm talking now, I'm talking about like solo content. Obviously can do interviews. That's the path of least resistance to podcasting, but it's going to take a lot longer to find your voice and perfect the craft, because you're speaking 10% of the time and the other person's speaking 90% of the time.
Absolutely.
So when you're doing solo episodes, like, you're going to find your voice a lot quicker. And that's the way that we really kind of structure the content, so people can make sure they're helping people and have a clear path to do it.
Yeah. I've seen so many people also like saying that, but I don't know if I'm the best expert, and that kind of holds them back. But I usually say that you're probably one step ahead of some people. So teach those that hasn't yet reached your level. And in time, you will grow your level of experience and expertise. So like part by part, you'll actually grow. And so that's not a problem.
I mean, and I did this with the Hustle to Freedom podcast, the podcast that kind of got me into this. So with that, if you go back and you look at the catalog, I didn't actually start putting out solo content until, I don't know, like around like episode 100 or somewhere right around there. And that was because like I was still like on this journey to like figure things out. And I was interviewing all these people to try to like figure out what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it. It's why I started the podcast. It just took me 100 episodes to like really consume the words that they were saying and figure out the direction that I wanted to go. So it wasn't a quick process for me at all. But when I got to like an episode 100, that's when we started an agency. That's when we started making some money. Then I wanted to start sharing that journey. Like here's what we're doing. Here's some of the things that I'm learning. So I kind of wanted to share some like real-time learning things. So like when I would go to a conference and I would learn something really cool, I would come back to the podcast and tell them what I learned and try to teach them that same thing. But I didn't want to do that until I was like making money already. I didn't want to be an expert and tell people how to make money if I wasn't making any money. So I spent the first 100 episodes, figuring things out. And then, then I started, preaching the gospel.
Awesome. Okay. So now we know a little bit about that, finding the voice and what to think about, but what would you say, how would you like tell someone how to structure a well-structured podcast? What does that look like? If I've never done it, if I'm a corporate CEO and I want to start a podcast, where if I'm like just a content creator and I want to be an influencer with a podcast, how should I structure my podcast to make the best out of it? Content-wise and like.
Yeah, for sure. So the way that we kind of outline it for people is, and this is a couple of the things just make your life easier after you kind of get to the editing phase and stuff. But we always start off, so you kind of have, if you use the method I mentioned earlier, by starting off with listing their, problems, desires, pain points, etc., creating a hook off of each one of those, like that hook is what we start the episode off with. So every episode, you're going to start off, you hit record and you say the hook, and it's something that's less than 30 seconds long. So say the hook, and then you don't like hit stop or anything. You keep recording, you take a pause, and then you go into the episode content. So then when you get to editing, you've got your hook at the beginning of the episode. All you do is clip it, insert your intro in between that time where you said that your hook and you started recording. So this just makes your life a lot easier if you do it like this. And then you go into the content, and with the content, then the first thing that we do, so if you think about from a listener's perspective, it would be after they heard the hook, the intro, we kind of elaborate on the intro again, like talk about it, right? Because they just heard a 30 to 60 second intro. Let's remind them a little bit about the hook and maybe slightly different wording. And then we tell a story that kind of frames up the hook and what it's about and how it relates to us and what we've learned. Because then we're about to teach them something, and we're going to teach them through the method of storytelling. So we craft a story around this hook and this problem or this desire, whatever it is. And then from there, we start to teach them, like, here's how you're probably doing whatever it is now. So here's that old way of doing things, and you're telling it through story. So you're probably telling how you used to do this or that or something about your personal life. And then you bring in let me back up. This is all like solo content, so not interviews, obviously, or anything like that. And then you want to like transition them to like, what's the new way to do things? Like here's this thing that you discovered through whatever. So like with me, like through the process of like interviewing 100 people, I learned that focus was, and being focused on one specific thing was like the key takeaway that I had from interviewing 100 people. So the old way was like scrambling around and doing this and that, and trying to go chase all the shiny objects. The new way was interviewed 100 people, focus was the thing. So you're teaching them this, and then you kind of just take it from there. That'll be a 15-20 minute episode just by doing that. Then you want to recap what did you just take them through, recap that journey, and then close it out. That's the most simplest approach without like overwhelming people. Hook, intro, repeat the intro, frame up a story. What's the old way of doing it? What's the new way of doing it? Quick 6 steps. You can obviously add a lot more to it. And in some of our clients, we have a lot more sections to it, but in the basic sense, if you want to teach people something through story, which is the most effective way, that's how you can do it.
Awesome. That's really good. That sort of like leads me into this, like one of the pre-written questions that I had is like, what are some bad recommendations when it comes to like starting or hosting a podcast that you've heard of before? Like things that people might still say, oh, I've heard this and this should be a really good thing, but with your expertise saying that this is not the way to go.
I'll give you 2. So the first one is right off, and if you ask 10 different people, you'll get 10 different answers. But the first thing that I think that people do wrong when they start a podcast is they go after A-level people right off the bat. Right. So there's some arguments to the good and bad of this, but I'll give you why I don't think it's a good idea. And I hit on it earlier. If you go after A-level people, and let's say just somehow you get like a Grant Cardone, a Gary Vee, like this Tony Robbins, like this level of people, like we'll just say if in the business space or whatever space that you're in. I mentioned earlier that you're going to suck, right? You're going to suck for your first 5-10 episodes. Why do you want to, when you're not good at the craft yet, interview the top people in the game? So you got so many people. They're like, if you start a podcast, you gotta like to get all the traction in the beginning. You got to start off with these huge people and try to land these big guests. I'm like, no, like that's a horrible idea because you're not going to be good. They're going to think it's wasted time because you're going to suck at interviewing them, and nobody's going to listen to it because you suck at interviewing them. So start off with like C and B level people, like people that that you're comfortable with. So like people that you're friends with on Facebook, that you've interacted with them in some capacity, people in real life that that you've interacted with, because you're going to be a lot more comfortable with them. You're not going to be starstruck. You're not going to be, like overly intimidated. No. So start with these kind of C, B level people that you have some even minor connection to, and start to perfect your craft with that, and then go after these big name people. Because also it's going to be a lot easier because these big name people are going to be like, oh, great, I'm episode number 2. This is cool. I'm sure he has 1 listener. So that's the first thing. And after I tell you the second thing, we can dive into these. And the second thing is like sponsorship. So people are like, oh, like I got to get my podcast sponsored so I make some money. Horrible idea. So the only time a sponsorship is good is if your podcast is huge. I'm talking like you're getting 250 plus thousand downloads per month on your podcast. Then start to think about a podcast sponsor. The reason for that is, until you're really, really big like that, the thing that is going to put the most money in your pocket is being your own sponsor. So talking about your products, your services, this types of things, right? Not some like Intel Core i9 computer or whatever, like whoever's sponsoring, like, so not only is it going to put more money in your pocket because it's your stuff and you get all the money, it's going to be more in line with your message, because I imagine that the products and the service you have align with whatever the podcast content that you're creating is. That it might not, but the chances are that it does. So that's a big thing that I see people is they immediately have like, oh, I want to get sponsors for the podcast. And it's just not a really a good idea because, and I was talking about the money thing. So a lot of people don't know there's metrics in podcast advertising, just like in any type of advertising. And it's like, cost per thousand, whatever, in this case, listeners, cost per thousand listeners. And there's a rate and it fluctuates in the market, like supply and demand, just like everything does. And it's not very much. So like for every 1,000 listeners that you get for like a 30-second ad roll, you might get like $15.
Yeah.
So one, you got to try to find a sponsor that, if let's say you have 1,000 listeners, you got to try to find a sponsor that's going to entertain you with only having 1,000 listeners, because it's going to be really, really hard. Right. And then when you do it, you get $15. So you put in all this work, you expose your listeners to whatever the hell this product is that these people agreed to do. Because I can tell you, if you got 1,000 listeners a month or an episode, and somebody says yes to you, it's probably some product that they can't get anybody else to promote. So you're going to be promoting some like crappy product to your audience. It's just going to be a bad experience all around. So don't worry about sponsors. Like, be your own sponsor.
Yeah. Great advice. Great advice.
Yep.
So before we wrap things up, I have a couple more questions.
Mm-hmm.
What tools and resources do you use for your podcast? Like, as an agency, you probably have a lot more knowledge than the average user on what's good and what's not. So what would you recommend people to actually, what tools do you recommend them to purchase or get for free or whatever?
Yeah, so I'll talk about it in a couple ways. So if you're a content creator, you're either creating a podcast or wanting to create a podcast, some of the tools that we use for editing, we use Adobe Audition. It's a paid product. You could also use Audacity. It's a free product. So either one of those could be used for editing. Like I said, we use Adobe Audition. For hosting, we use Simplecast. We recommend Simplecast to everybody. 9 times out of 10, we move our clients from whatever platform they were on to Simplecast, if they're down for it. And so a lot of people recommend Libsyn. I don't like Libsyn at all. It has the brand name behind it, but it's like playing the original Nintendo, but it being a podcast host. Like, it's like, it looks like it was built in like 1995, and I just don't like it. It's so not user friendly. But again, they just have this brand name because they've been around so long. So, and they have an affiliate program. So a lot of people recommend them just for that. And so I don't recommend them at all. I think they're horrible, especially if you're just starting out. So we use Simplecast for hosting. And really, if you think about it, you need to edit a podcast and you need to host a podcast. That's all you really need to get going. And you need a microphone, right? This isn't like software or anything, but you need a microphone. We always, whether it be a beginner or a high-level person, we recommend the ATR 2100 from Audio-Technica, that microphone. Great all-around mic, very durable, gives you good quality sound. So we always recommend that mic. If you have the money, then the next step up. So that mic is around like $70. The next step up that I would recommend would be like the Shure SM57 or something like that. You would find it if you Googled it, but it's like $350. So those are two I'd recommend. Big gap, start with the ATR 2100. Yeah. And then on the agency side, we use the tools that I just mentioned, and then to like manage everything, we use Trello. So we find that it works really good for our workflow. I've kind of customized it a lot. So I'm big in like automation and stuff. So we have tons of automation built into our Trello. Like, you move a card here and it shoots an email to this person and notifies this person and adds this checklist. And, I'm a big automation person. So we kind of built our workflow through Trello. I've played around with some other programs, but just as much as you can customize Trello with all the power-ups and this type of stuff, it just works really, really good for a content agency, which is what we are. Somebody who you have each individual output is its own project. So for us, a podcast episode is its own project. It gets its own card in the workflow. So it works great in the Kanban style Trello or Kanban setup that Trello has. You just move it across. Each column is its own activity for its own people on the team. And yeah, we just manage it like that.
That's awesome. I use Trello as well for all like VA activities.
Yep.
To help smooth everything out. I mean, automation is the key to become free with your time. So yeah, I know what you mean. Okay, so one last question for this free to all listen to part. What would you say are the 3 top advices to anyone, companies or bigger companies or entrepreneurs wanting or planning to start a podcast? What would your 3 top advices be?
Probably the first one be just have a goal, right? And so like come into it and know what you want to get out of it, because if you don't know what you want to get out of it, then you're not going to be satisfied with the result. And it'll lead into my point too. But it like having a goal, knowing where you want to go, you can measure it, you can structure your content around it, you can get guests to support that goal, things like that. The second point I would make is a piece of advice is it's going to be more difficult than you think to get traction. So it's just like, think about when you spin up a website. Do people come running to it? No, right? Your traffic slowly grows, right? You start up a YouTube channel. Do people come running to it? No, it slowly grows. Podcast is no different. For some reason, people think it's like this build it and they will run to it mentality, but it doesn't happen like that unless you're like a household name. It's just not going to work like that. So know that it's going to grow slowly. This is why a lot of people, so there's this, it's called like the curse of 7, right? In the podcast world where a lot of podcasters don't make it past episode 7 because it's a lot of work, especially if you don't have the resources, meaning money, to outsource some of the stuff. It can be a lot to sit down, script everything, record everything, edit everything, publish everything. If you want to do like graphics and stuff to promote it, do all the graphics. Like it can take a lot of time to do even a single episode. So go into it knowing that it's going to be an investment of your time if you don't want to outsource it. It took me, I think at episode 36, I started to outsource some stuff. I was like, whew, man, this is a lot. But I made it to 36 doing everything myself. And I was putting out 2 episodes a week at that time, interviews. So I still did all the guest and recording and distribution of like the graphics and stuff. But I hired somebody to do the editing, the uploading to the host, putting all the information in the host, writing the blog post, and creating the graphics. But I did everything else. So there's that. So like have a goal, understand that it's not going to be easy. And then I think an interesting one that, if somebody is a business owner, is there's a lot of ways to use a podcast that people don't consider. So like what we're talking about now, it's like literally sitting down, like writing content, like recording content, putting it out there around like a story, solving somebody's problem or interviewing somebody, something like that. But people don't consider like podcasts are great. Like if you have a large team, like I'm talking like 50 plus, like a podcast can be a great way to train people. So
yeah,
like if you have like a sales team or something like that, it works amazing because you can put all your training in podcast form, right? And these people can listen to it anywhere. They can be on the plane. They can be like driving in a car to their next appointment, things like this. And you can train them on your processes as a company through the medium of podcasting. So this is like oftentimes totally underutilized. And the other way that a company, again, probably 50 plus at least, would be through internal communication. So if you get a large company and you want to get a message out, so you can like send emails and like clutter up people's inboxes more, or you can have like the CEO sit down and give like a 5-minute talk on what is this message that they're trying to get out, what is this change in the company, etc., and just have it part of like people's like onboarding and things like that to subscribe to the podcast. It's part of like what you do. And then they get push notifications that like, hey, this podcast episode is out there. It's an internal podcast. It's not public. It's a private feed, but it's a way to, communicate what's going on with the company. So, those are just kind of two ways that I see that are underutilized, that if you have a big company, you might want to consider.
That's awesome advice. Actually, I was like, whoa, if I had had that when I was like working as a salesman, that would have been amazing.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Ryan, for sharing with us. Absolutely appreciate the value you've been sharing. For those of you at home that would like to know more about podcasting, especially marketing with podcasting and a whole range of other extremely profitable and valuable tips, I have something awesome I'd like to share with you. Just click the button on this page to purchase the All Access Pass to get a lifetime marketing access to all these amazing lectures from some of the greatest people within marketing and sales today that you will be able to view during this whole summit. And you'll also be getting an extra interview from each and every one of them that I've recorded, where they'll teach more advanced ins and outs and tricks of the trade of their respective topic, plus a lot more than which I've stacked in this VIP area. The value of those videos is absolutely out of this world, and I don't want you to miss out on it. So make sure you click the button on the page and read more about the All Access Pass and purchase yours today. And Ryan, thank you so much again for being a part of the Successful Marketing Summit. We really appreciate it.
Glad to be here. Appreciate it, Matt.
Thank you.